The world's largest tree probably isn't what you're expecting. If you're anything like me, you're likely imagining something monolithic and legendary. A giant sequoia over 1,000 feet in height, maybe a Sicilian chestnut large enough to house a small cottage, or an olive tree whose gnarled base has witnessed the flux of ancient civilization. Those trees do exist, and they're all really neat, but you'd be wrong. In actuality, if you'll permit a certain loophole, the world's largest tree and the heaviest known organism is Pando, an individual male quaking aspen located in the Fish Lake National Forest region of Utah. Now, for the uninitiated, though I doubt very many of you are, quaking aspen, Populus tremuloides, are one of the most widely distributed trees in North America, most densely populated in Canada and Alaska, with clustered groups growing as far south as New Mexico. They are, however, neither long-lived nor especially durable trees, so to think that one could wind up being the largest known tree is unusual, to say the least. But here's where that loophole comes in. See, Pando isn't just one tree, or rather, it's not one individual tree. It's anywhere from a couple hundred to maybe a few thousand trees. Pando itself is a small forest consisting of a single germline. But how is something like this possible? Well, since plants are freely able to clone themselves, you'll often see in species that are highly clonal what are referred to as clonal colonies, where a single plant, or even clones of that plant, will end up producing a small population of genetically identical offsets. In the case of Pando, each tree is bound to the other through a root system occupying over 100 acres of space. Now here's two fun botanical terms for you. An individual tree in this colony, excluding the parent plant, is what we would call a rammet, while the forest itself, the sum total of all trees, would be called a genet. And of course, the quaking aspen is a tree highly inclined towards clonal reproduction. You'd be as likely to find a single aspen tree as you would a single stalk of bamboo. This makes it a pretty unruly tree to grow in captivity, but that hasn't stopped hundreds of Mountain States homeowners from ruining the lives of their neighbors with their poor horticultural decisions. Anyway, much like their siblings, the cottonwoods and the poplars, quaking aspen often tend to be fast-growing opportunists. Where they are native, they tend to be pioneer species in clear-cut forests and burn zones, forming the early canopies of succession forests. In the right locations, where there's plenty of sunlight and not much in the way of competition, you'll very soon find an aspen grove. Additionally, aspen forests are far less likely to stoke fire than pine forests are. The leaves and wood tend to be much wetter than that of conifers, and if the crown happens to burn, the roots will set out suckers. Once again, there's that clonal reproduction, and the forest will, eventually come to reestablish itself. What tends more often to threaten aspen populations, and indeed what currently threatens Pando, is an increase in grazing from native herbivores. The tender, wet suckers of aspen, the traits which help insulate them from fire, also make them into choice forage for ungulates like deer, elk, and bison. And since Western expansionism kind of eliminated apex predator populations over the past 2 centuries, herbivory in the present day goes mostly unhindered, resulting in a trophic cascade which dramatically affects aspen populations. But the good news is, in places like Yellowstone, where gray wolf populations have been reintroduced, the corresponding aspen recovery rates have been equally dramatic. And of course, since trees serve as keystone species for their own respective ecosystems, aspen recovery corresponds to a recovery in wildlife specialized to that particular type of forest. From cavity-nesting bird species, to very particular wood-boring insects, even to various species of mushrooms which have high substrate affinity for aspen wood and aspen roots. So while Pando likely isn't what we imagine when we think of the world's largest tree, I personally think it gives us a lot more to consider, both botanically and ecologically speaking. And also, you should just support wolf reintroduction initiatives. You'd be stupid not to.